So how many of you guys have been to the Ozarks? Anybody vacationed in the Ozarks? Okay, some of you know the Ozarks really, really well. It's kind of a hidden gem. You don't really hear people talking about, well, I'm going to go vacation in the Ozarks. That's like a place to be, but it is a beautiful part of the country, big trees and lakes and streams. And this is actually a picture of the Lake of the Ozarks, which is not very far from where I lived before my family and I moved here to Kingwood. We lived right outside of Springfield, Missouri in Nixa, and that was my church, Nixa Christian Church. That was the first church that I was a senior pastor in. And it was just a really, really neat little church. It was an older church, meaning it was planted or started back in 1892. And I know for the disciples folks among us, so that's kind of middle-aged probably. There are some that are much, much older than that one. But it was during my time when I was there that we celebrated our 125th anniversary. And that was kind of fun. One of the things that we did during the festivities was we pulled out an old time capsule. Now, I wish I could say that it was from back in 1892, but no, it was like from the 80s. And you could kind of expect what the time capsule was in there. We had some bulletins, right? And we had some cassette tapes, and we had some VHS tapes. Abby, do you know what that is? You do? Okay, I was just making sure that you knew what a cassette tape was or a VHS tape. We had a choir robe in there. We had a mug with kind of our little symbol on it and everything. We also had a directory, which was really good for just some laughs, to be honest, because generally the 80s, I think, was the ugliest decade. I mean, we go back and look at our pictures of what we wore and how hairstyles and that kind of stuff. I'll be happy for just hair generally, but like back in the 80s, it's just really kind of an unfortunate just decade altogether. So what it got me thinking about, if we were to compile a bunch of different symbols in a time capsule that would help somebody decades from now understand what it was like to come through this season, this last 2 years, what would be in that time capsule? Now, I put this up there just to kind of get you going, to get you thinking about what might be in there. We've got, of course, a mask, and we've got some toilet paper, and then kind of the hourglass, the symbol of time, and how, time just, well, we had plenty of it, right? And it seemed to drag and drag and drag. And then, of course, we have the vaccination shot, and they have this ruler, and I think that's supposed to mean 6 feet apart, distancing. What else would you include in a time capsule that would help somebody kind of get what you felt during the pandemic? A link to a Zoom meeting, absolutely. Just a link, or maybe it's a laptop or something that's opened up and you got all these different faces on there, right? So we all learned how to do that really well. What else would you put in there? I wrote down that I would put in there some running shoes. That was my therapy. I ran more during the pandemic than I had ever run, just for stress. I mean, just to be honest, it was just for stress. I was running off stress during that time. I thought that maybe you might put in a Black Lives Matter t-shirt, just because that was a significant event or series of events that took place, George Floyd, and that just compounded what we were feeling. It made it so much more complicated, the division that was a part of the racial divide in those events. I also thought about, of course, the election. I mean, you can't talk about how difficult the time was without mentioning kind of the buildup and the Biden and the Trump and all of what that became. You can't, that was a major factor. That was a part of the puzzle. Maybe you put a bumper sticker in there, a Trump bumper sticker and a Biden bumper sticker, in order to help people to kind of really get it. Well, this morning what I want us to do is I want us to make a transition We've been kind of evaluating and thinking about what it was like, and we did a little bit of that last week. But this week I want us to kind of transition to really drilling in and leaning into what we learned. What are the lessons that we've learned that are available to us during this unique season? I know that I asked you to fill out the survey, and many of you did, and we talked about some of those things last week. But I want us to spend a little bit more time with it today. Today we continue on in a sermon series entitled Embarcing the New. We know that we're on the cusp of a new year. We know that we're all kind of thinking together. I mean, even looking around here this morning, let's just say we are. We're like, okay, where do we go from here? What are our next steps? We want them to be thoughtful steps. We want them to be hopeful steps. But what should our steps be? And I want to also say, some of you came up to me after service last week and said, you know that the pandemic's not over, right? Because I was talking about, where do we go and what's next and all of that. Of course I know. Of course I know that the Omicron especially is, the numbers are significant. But there are a lot of experts that are saying that the strength of the virus is not as strong as it was, and that there is real reason to hope for major changes. Even in the next few months, we might see some reasons for real hope. And of course, we're all hoping for that as well. Last week, I introduced this cycle that we can identify in our own lives, and we can kind of plot it with the pandemic. We can plot the time. We remember back pre-March of 2020, how kind of things felt, and we're kind of motoring along. Orientation is a time, orientation right there at the top is a time where things are going pretty well. Plans are kind of moving along. Life is full of norms. And then we move into a disorientation time, and that might be a lot of different things. It might be the changing of a job, or a relationship comes to an end, or a diagnosis, or a loss of a loved one, or whatever it might be. But for us, we talk about the pandemic as a major disorienting time. All of these questions, all of these things we thought that were safe and secure, they're not. They're just questions were brought up. But we're not supposed to live in the disorientation time. We move into reorientation. And the reorientation time is when we really start asking, what can we learn? What can we learn from this time? What are the real lessons only available to us right now when we've really been through it? What are the lessons that we can learn? I mean, what an incredible waste it would be if we were unable to learn and to grow, and we just ended up running right through this same cycle, trying to learn it again, learn the lessons again. There's a benefit in this time if we're willing to receive that gift. So this morning, I want you to look with me, if you would, as we kind of transition from this disorienting time into the reorienting time. There's some insight from Pope Francis's last book that I want to share with you this morning. In the trials of life, you reveal your own heart, how solid, how merciful, how big, or how small. I want you to think about. In the survey, some of you shared some observations, some lessons that it's almost kind of like general lessons, and some of you got kind of personal about it. But I want to ask you, like, what did you learn about you during the pandemic time? What did you learn about you? What are some lessons that were specific to you during that time? There were times in the pandemic when I was kind of proud of myself. I was like, yeah, I'm handling this. Kind of making it through this. This is rough, but I'm doing really well. And then there are other times where I was like right on the edge of the cliff, right? Like, I don't know how much longer I can handle this. And I think probably all of us can identify. We also learned a lot about family and friends and neighbors and colleagues. Some of my colleagues and some of my friends, I was so impressed. I was inspired by how they were making it through this, how they were making just such wise decisions, the words that they would offer, and just seemed the perspective. And I was just like, wow, they're amazing. And then some other, I'll just say, like, I have some family that got in fistfights. I mean, during this time, they were pushed to the edge, and I was like, that happens? I mean, really? Like, do people like, let's take this outside? You know, I mean, does that really happen? I know it happens in middle school and maybe in high school, but do adults do that? But I have family that literally went, you know, kind of, all of us struggled through, had our good moments and maybe had our bad moments as well. Let's go to this next word of wisdom from Pope Francis. The basic rule of crisis is that you do not come out of it the same. If you get through it, you come out better or worse, but never the same. One of the traits that the scriptures really elevate for us is that we, as followers of Jesus, would be teachable. That we would not ever arrive at a place where we just, okay, I got it. I've arrived. I know what the truth is. I know what, I've got a handle on all of this. But that we would constantly be learning and growing and stretching. That's a part of what Jesus intended. Jesus actually said this in Mark chapter 4. For whatever is hidden is meant to be disclosed. Whatever is concealed is meant to be brought out into the open. If anyone has ears to hear, let them hear. Jesus says, are you learning? Are you listening? Are you growing? Are you stretching? I would even suggest that as we come into this space, whether you're here in the sanctuary or whether you're online, that it's a conscious choice to be teachable. To say, I've got a lot left to learn. I'm open. Come, let's talk about, tell me more. It's always a great thing to say when someone is expressing a different perspective from yours. Tell me more. I want to learn more about where at least where you come. I might not agree with you in the end, but at least I understand better where you're coming from. Being teachable is absolutely essential in any relationship. You know that to be true. The relationships where there's a dynamic of give and take and there's energy and there's a teachability in that relationship. It's a healthy relationship, but a relationship that becomes stagnant, where one or the other feels like, well, you know, this is just what it is, and we just kind of go on our way, then oftentimes stagnancy leads to death, doesn't it? In relationship with God, in relationship with each other. A friend of mine, about 2.5, 3 years ago, he got home from work. This was pre-pandemic. He got home from work, and his wife was waiting for him with divorce papers. And he was just blown away. But in the next few weeks, and actually right there, I think within a few hours, his wife actually looked him in the eyes and says, there's no way that you can be surprised by this. Our relationship has been stagnant. We haven't talked about anything that matters. We haven't dealt with a conflict. We've just kicked the can down the road. We haven't loved each other for years. And he sat there and was like, oh my goodness, what has happened? And the same thing is true of our relationships with significant others. It's the same in our relationship with God. If we've arrived, and we're not teachable and growing and stretching, then that relationship is suffering as well. So this morning I want to invite you to join me in a passage that I feel like can really speak to us. James is a book that I really, really love. Outside of the Gospels, the book of James is probably my favorite book. Most scholars agree that James was the brother of Jesus, and so you can only imagine kind of the different perspective that he might have had when he was watching Jesus, learning from Jesus in those formative moments. And so I want to share with you just a few observations from James chapter 1, verses 2 2 through 6. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Actually, I want to actually just stop right there in the very first verse. Consider it pure joy. Like, this is James's opening line. There's not like a paragraph before this where he says different things or kind of sets up this statement. Literally, it's kind of like, I'm writing this to so-and-so, blessings on so-and-so. This is his first line, his very first point. Consider it pure joy whenever you face trials. I mean, is there a more ridiculous statement? I mean, what in the world could James have been thinking to start his letter, his book, with this statement right here? Under what circumstances would any of us ever say that it's joyful to go through trials? What could James have been thinking? Well, I feel like what he's pointing at is something that's really foundational to our faith. The only way that you can be joyful amidst trials is if you are completely confident that God is right in the middle of the situation, God is present, repurposing bad for good. That is how you can maintain a sense of joy and peace. It's not as though it doesn't hurt. It's not like it's going to be enjoyable. But you can maintain joy and peace when you are confident that God is right in the middle of the situation with you. You haven't been abandoned. God is right in the middle of the situation, repurposing bad for good. That's a transformative way of seeing life. Do you have people in your life that kind of embody a faith like that? Do you have friends? Do you have mentors? Do you have former pastors? I don't know. Do you have people in your life that embody that kind of faith? I tell you what, I have a friend named Scott. During the pandemic, I called him on a regular basis because he was like living water. When I was on the cliff's edge, and I would call Scott, he would give me just these. I mean, it's not as though he's Mr. Church Guy. I mean, he's a pastor, but he's very real. He was like, gosh, I know, man, this is rough. It is hard. And honestly, at times I struggle with kind of locating God and all of this and what the next steps might be, but things are going to be okay, man. Things are going to be okay. God is here. God is going to provide just for the next step. That's all that you need to figure out is what is the next step? What's the next step? You have those people in your life that just encourage you with that wisdom. They're centered in the midst of it all. There were also other friends that I knew I wasn't going to call. Like, they were not the person that I needed to talk to. They were the ones that had just posted on Facebook one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. You know what I mean? Like, kind of some of those people that were like, okay, not going to call that person, but we need those people. We need those people that help us and to say those things, to talk us off the ledge. The second observation that I have from this passage is right here. The testing of your faith, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. So trials produce an opportunity for perseverance. And perseverance, let perseverance finish its work. Perseverance has work to do. Perseverance actually offers a gift. When we persevere through times like this, through trials, when we cultivate the ability to persevere, there's a payoff, there's a gift at the end. Can you see it? What is it is the gift, the payoff from persevering through trials? What is it? You can see it in the end of verse 4 and then in verse 5 as well. What is it? Maturity. The fruit and wisdom, the fruit of perseverance is maturity and wisdom. Maturity and wisdom, the image immediately came to me when I was doing my preparation, the image that is offered in Malachi of the refiner's fire, and how the metal is placed into the fire, and that metal, it actually is purified by the heat, and so it actually becomes stronger. But while it's still pliable because it's so hot, it can be fashioned in all kinds of different ways for different purposes. And friends, I just want to say, that God did not bring this pandemic. I read an article here lately that you might be astounded by this, but 35% of Christians in America believe that God brought the pandemic as a punishment. 35% are trying to figure out, okay, God is love and God brought the pandemic. That's why theology is really important. That's why thoughtfulness is really, really important, because there are a lot of people out there trying to figure out how God can be at the same time loving and bringing this virus that has killed so many and brought so much suffering. I want to say to you, God did not bring the pandemic, but God does want to repurpose your experience of the pandemic to refine you, to make you wiser, to make you more mature. One of my favorite pastors that I feel like is kind of a generational voice is Adam Hamilton. He's the pastor of Resurrection Church, or Church of the Resurrection in Kansas City. Just an extraordinary leader, and is not afraid at all to speak into the big, nasty, contentious issues. But one of the things that his church did during the pandemic was that in a survey, he asked the church, what are some of the major emotions that you experience? What are the major emotions you've experienced during the pandemic? And they had 10,000 people respond. So it's a real big church. But what they were able to do is they were able to segment out the responses into the 20s, the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And one of the things that he was able to identify is that there was a major shift in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. The main emotions that they experienced were frustration and anxiety. That was just the dominant emotion of the time, frustration and anxiety. But as you got up in the 60s, 50s, 60s, but especially 70s and 80s, the response was very different. It was hopeful, and it was that there was an experience of love amidst, but there was also loneliness, which makes sense because a lot of our older folks were staying home or stayed home longer. And so there was a loneliness that was a part of it. But ultimately, what happened there? What's the difference between those two segments? It's about maturity. It's about maturity. It's about, I've been there and done that. It's about, this isn't my first rodeo. There are some that I was sharing in the other service that Linda Goddard, when in the midst of all the turmoil politically, she and I were talking about all this, and she said, you realize that the 60s were just like this, right? Vietnam, divided country, nobody believed that the government was worth nobody trusted the government. This has happened before. And I was like, oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, that was so wonderful to hear that we've made it through times like this before. Thank you, Linda, for your wise, mature counsel. There are some that have gone through smallpox. They've gone through polio. They understand with a mature voice. They understand, and they can offer that to us. Finally, there's a clear goal. There's a clear goal in this passage. Basically, it's don't be waves. Let's try not to be waves. God wants our faith to anchor us during times of trial so that we will not be like waves, like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. I can definitely identify with feeling like that during this time. But I want to just say something to you guys. You know we're all going to make it through this. You know that we're going to make it through. We don't know exactly how long it's going to take, but we're going to come out on the other side of this. We might always kind of be touched by this, and we've been talking about that. But we're going to make it through this, but you know what's going to happen? We're going to develop our norms. We're going to come back into that orientation season, and before long, what's going to happen? The next disorienting event. The next one. You know it's going to happen. Hopefully it's not anything like this one, but there's going to be another thing that you go through, or our church goes through, or our nation goes through. So there's going to be another disorienting event. So isn't it so imperative that we mind the lessons, that we learn the lessons, that we move forward in maturity, that we really have a foundation of wisdom so that we don't have to go back and learn the lessons again and again and again. James offers this blessing at the end. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life that God has promised those who love him. This crown word in the Greek is garland. It's that image that we see in the New Testament and Paul about running the race. It's the garland that you put around your head when you finish the race. When you've walked that path and you've understood that our faith invites us into a worldview where we realize God is right here, walking alongside us every day, repurposing bad for good. I want to invite you guys to, as we finish, have you been working on this? We gave this to you last week. This is your Reorientation Psalm. And this is such a great vehicle for you to kind of lean in and to learn some of those lessons that are available only in this very, very unique time. Margaret's going to be preaching next week, but throughout the next few weeks, I'm going to make sure that we kind of revisit this. And we're also creating a platform where you can put these onto our website and we can kind of interact about our reorientation psalms, the lessons we're learning through this very unique time. We're going to make it through it. Let's come to the communion table together.